July 1944. The Second World War was still raging across Europe and the Pacific. Cities were burning, armies were advancing, and millions were dying. And yet in a quiet resort town in New Hampshire, something else was happening. 730 delegates from 44 nations gathered behind closed doors. Outside, the world was on fire. Inside, the foundations of the modern financial system were being quietly rewritten. The paradox was striking. Amid global chaos, a new order was being designed, one that promised stability, fairness, and cooperation. It would be called Bretton Woods, and for decades, it would be remembered not just as a conference, but as a turning point where financial power subtly changed hands. Before Bretton Woods, the world looked very different. The world's economic center of gravity lay elsewhere. For more than a century, Britain had been the financial heart of the global system. The pound sterling was the dominant reserve currency. Backed by an empire that stretched across continents, London's banks financed railways, ports, and governments from India to Africa. Even the United States, which was rapidly industrializing, had relied heavily on European capital to fuel its rise. But the First World War fractured that order. Britain emerged victorious, yet financially exhausted. The gold standard, once a symbol of stability, became a straitjacket in a world struggling with debt, unemployment, and political extremism. The system began to crack. The years between the wars exposed the fragility of the old system. Countries devalued their currencies to gain a trade advantage. They threw up protectionist barriers. Financial panic spread like wildfire. Together, these things deepened the Great Depression. Nations learned a painful lesson. Uncoordinated monetary policy could collapse entire economies. By the early 1940s, one thing was clear. After the war, the world needed a new financial architecture, or it would be doomed to repeat the same mistakes. America entered this moment from a position of unprecedented strength. Its mainland had been untouched by the war. Its factories were running at full capacity. And most critically, it held the majority of the world's gold reserves. By some estimates, nearly 3/4 of all the gold in the world was sitting in American vaults. While Europe lay in ruins, America was the world's creditor. Bretton Woods wasn't just an opportunity to stabilize the global economy. It was a chance to formalize a new hierarchy. And this new order would be shaped by the visions of two men. On one side, you had John Maynard Keynes, representing Britain. He envisioned a truly balanced system, one that constrained both debtors and creditors. He proposed creating a neutral global currency and mechanisms to prevent any single nation from dominating the system. It was a vision of shared responsibility. On the other side stood Harry Dexter White, the chief American negotiator. His plan was different. It anchored the entire system to the US dollar. Gold would remain central, but only through America. The dollar would be the bridge between every other currency and gold. The final agreement reflected the reality of power. The dollar would be convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. All other currencies would then be pegged to the dollar. Two new institutions were also created: the International Monetary Fund, to manage balance of payments, crises, and the World Bank, to finance reconstruction and development. On paper, it looked like a cooperative framework. In practice, it placed the United States at the absolute center of global finance. And at first, the system worked beautifully. War-torn nations in Europe and Asia rebuilt their economies. Global trade expanded at an incredible rate. Exchange rates stabilized, bringing predictability to international business. For 2 decades, the world experienced unprecedented economic growth, often called the golden age of capitalism. The dollar, backed by American gold and economic dominance, became the backbone of international commerce. Trust was high. The United States appeared disciplined, responsible, and committed to stability. But beneath the surface, a quiet imbalance was forming. The entire system depended on one critical assumption: that the United States would always have enough gold to back all the dollars circulating around the world. As global trade expanded, more and more dollars flowed abroad to fuel reconstruction and later to fund Cold War commitments like the Vietnam War. America began running persistent deficits. Dollars started accumulating in foreign central banks. But America's gold reserves did not grow with them. In fact, they started to shrink. By the 1960s, this contradiction was impossible to ignore. The world needed more dollars to function, to finance the growing global economy. But every new dollar that was printed weakened the promise of gold convertibility. This dilemma, later named the Triffin paradox, revealed a fundamental flaw in the Bretton Woods system. Stability required confidence. Confidence required restraint, and restraint was increasingly incompatible with the ambitions of a global superpower. Trust began to break. European nations, particularly France, under Charles de Gaulle, began questioning the system openly. They criticized America for exporting its inflation and financing its foreign policy with an overvalued currency. Some countries began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars, as was their right under the agreement. America's gold reserves steadily declined. The promise at the heart of Bretton Woods was eroding, not because of some grand conspiracy, but through structural inevitability. Then, in August 1971, the illusion ended. President Richard Nixon went on television and announced that the United States would unilaterally suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. With a single decision, the anchor of the Bretton Woods system was cut loose. The world moved almost overnight from a gold-backed order to a fiat-based one, where currencies were backed only by government decree. Officially, the move was framed as temporary. In reality, it marked the end of an era. But what followed was not collapse. It was a transformation. Currencies began to float freely against one another. Financial markets grew exponentially in size and complexity. And the dollar, now untethered from gold, did not weaken. It actually became even more dominant. Oil, commodities, global trade all continued to be priced in dollars. The promise of gold was gone, but the power of the dollar-centric system remained. This was the quiet deception of Bretton Woods. A system sold with a vision of shared stability and multilateral balance delivered a system where monetary privilege flowed disproportionately to one nation. The United States gained what was called an exorbitant privilege, the ability to finance its deficits, to project its power and influence global policy simply by creating more of its own currency. The institutions designed for cooperation, the IMF and World Bank, often ended up reflecting the priorities of their largest shareholder. Yet this wasn't just a story of manipulation, it was also a story of consent. Other nations accepted the dollar-centric system because, for the most part, it worked. It offered liquidity, predictability, and access to the world's largest and most dynamic markets. Even critics of the system found themselves dependent on it. The system endured not because it was perfectly fair, but because no viable alternative ever emerged. Today, the echoes of Bretton Woods are everywhere. Debates over de-dollarization, the rise of digital currencies, anxieties about global debt, all trace their roots back to that summer in 1944. The institutions born there still shape economic policy across the world. The power shift it formalized continues to influence geopolitics, trade, and financial stability today. In the end, Bretton Woods was not a single moment of deception. It was a gradual revelation. A system built to prevent the chaos of the past ended up concentrating power in a new way. A promise of balance evolved into a reality of asymmetry. And yet without it, the incredible post-war recovery might never have happened. Bretton Woods reminds us that financial systems are never neutral. They reflect the power structures of their time. They solve yesterday's problems while planting the seeds of tomorrow's tensions. And they endure not because they are perfect, but because the world, for now, still believes in them. Thanks for watching. If you found this look into financial history interesting, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. See you next time.